Target for Rage, also known as Detention, The Siege at Johnson High, was released in 1997. This is directed by Michael Watkins, it's written by Larry Golin, and we have a cast including Rick Schroder as Jason Copeland. We also have Freddie Prinze Jr., Henry Winkler, great cast, really amazing performances. The film itself is not an easy watch, but I absolutely recommend it. This was recommended to me, and as soon as I read the description, I thought, yes, I want to see how they do this, because I'd never seen a film, to my recollection, with this topic. And it's about a high school shooting, so straight away, it's going to be a very heavy subject. And it's actually based on a true story. It's based on a shooting that I hadn't heard of, which in itself is a horrendous concept. There shouldn't be so many school shootings that more and more pop up that we hadn't heard of. I say we, I'm speaking about myself. But there are a lot of them, unfortunately. And this one is about the Lyndhurst High School shooting. And there are two things that I want to say here. First of all, if, like me, you'd never heard of that incident before, I'd say don't read about it until after you'd seen the film. I purposefully didn't look into it because I didn't want to know what happened. I didn't want to know how things concluded or what happened with the shooter. So I went into the film, other than knowing it was based on a true story, I knew nothing about what was going to happen. And for me, that meant I had no idea what direction it was going to take. And that, for me, was the best viewing experience. The other thing I want to say is that I want to praise them for changing the name of the shooter. I'm not even going to say the real shooter's name. And the reason for this is because I think we should remember the victims, but where possible, don't even speak the shooter's name, because it risks giving them infamy. It risks giving them the attention they want. Now, I'm not saying that in this case it was done for the attention, but we do know that there are cases. I realise this is a long introduction. I'll talk more about the film in a second, but I think this is an important point. There are cases where we hear people saying that they want that infamy. They're inspired by cases that have gone down in history and they want to replicate that. So by not giving those individuals the attention they crave, again, not all of them are doing it for the attention and infamy, I think that's the best way forward. So by changing the name for this film, in the film the individual is called Jason Copeland, I think that was a very good decision. I don't know if that's the reason for their decision, but I think it was definitely the right way to go. And this is about an individual, Jason, who didn't graduate from high school. In the film, it's called Johnson High School, and his life is not where he wants it to be. We very briefly get a look at what his life is like. While I don't like films that take a long time to get to the main narrative, I think maybe they could have done a bit more with setting it up, but what we got was interesting enough, and he decides that his life is a mess because he didn't graduate, and he thinks that at least one teacher is responsible for this. So he decides to go back to his high school with a shotgun and take revenge, and holds various students hostage. The film is also known as Hostage High. I don't like that title. I kind of like Target for Rage. I think that's definitely quite an interesting title, and the film is about what happens as a result of that. And obviously I don't want to go into too much detail, but we have a lot of scenes with negotiators trying to work with Jason to find out what he wants and to obviously save as many people as possible, and I don't want to go into any more detail than that. I don't know if it's 100% accurate to the true story. I have done a little bit of reading about it after watching the film, and there are obviously some similarities because it is inspired by or based on the events at Lyndhurst High School. But I don't know if it's 100% accurate. If anybody has any information on that, please feel free to share. It is a very difficult watch at times. There are scenes that are really challenging to get through, really, really emotional. And there are times when it's maybe a little calmer. I think we need those moments where we're just kind of waiting for something to happen. That feels very realistic in a hostage situation, based on my very limited knowledge of hostage situations. There can be moments where it's just a waiting game, waiting for the next stage in the negotiation or waiting for the individual to decide what their next move is. And in those moments, as a viewer, there is the opportunity to bring down those heightened emotions, and then a couple of minutes later, they go back up again. So there are periods where it's a little calmer, but for the most part, it is a very intense, very unpredictable watch. The only thing that I didn't love, and I don't know if this is just my ignorant perspective, if you like, but I feel like some of the students, not all of them, but some of the students that were held hostage didn't feel very believable. The way they were acting is certainly not how I imagine I would act in that situation. But if somebody were to tell me, actually, that's quite a realistic representation, then absolutely fair enough, I will accept that. But just for me watching it as a viewer, some of them were a little bit too calm, and one of them was a little bit rude and nasty to another girl, and she just didn't seem to have her priorities right. This was a little later on in the film. It was a small detail, but it made me think about some of the students' reactions, and some of them felt unbelievable. But I'm not an expert on this by any means, so I could be incorrect about that. In general, Target for Rage or Detention, The Siege at Johnson High is a powerful film. It's a difficult film to watch, but I'd say it's absolutely worth it. It's not going to be for everybody, but I was very keen to see how they'd do this. As I said, to my knowledge, to my memory, I had never seen a film like this, and I was keen to see how they'd do it and also how I'd feel watching it, because I'm sure, like most people, I hate watching real footage of this kind of thing. I'm a big, big true crime fan, but that's one area of true crime that I do struggle with, that I don't necessarily have the stomach for. It does make me feel uneasy. Like, again, I imagine it does for a lot of people. So I was keen to see what it would be like watching it as a fictional film, dramatising the real events, and it was definitely an intense experience. Absolutely worth it, though. And if it sounds like a film that you might be interested in, then I'd say Target for Rage is definitely worth checking out. I also want to praise Rick Schroder for the portrayal of the character of Jason Copeland. Amazing performance. Obviously, a really unlikable character. I think maybe at the beginning, if we'd spend a little bit more time getting to know him and his struggles in his present day, maybe the character could have been a little bit more well developed. We could have had a stronger emotional response to his situation, because I feel like the beginning very slightly touched on that, and we got a slight look at how difficult his life was. It could have been quite easy to feel sorry for him, at least to begin with. I think maybe if they'd sat with that a little bit longer, it could have been a much more emotionally confusing experience, but in a way that's really fascinating and thought-provoking. So I think they could have maybe slightly done something different with that. But again, I don't know how closely they were creating this character based on the true individual. So that's not a complaint or a criticism or anything, more just food for thought, something that I was thinking about. But Schroder gave an absolutely amazing performance. And as I said, Target for Rage is one that I think is definitely worth checking out.